Part 60. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 593. The troop recycling station can be said to be a core building of Yuri's army. Relying on the cruel methods of Yuri's troops, infantry or armored troops are sent to the troop recycling station for forced killing and recycling, providing a large amount of combat resources for the entire army. Funds. During the game, Yuri base only needs to persist in the difficult period at the beginning, and there will be almost no need to produce slave mines later. It only needs a troop recycling station, and with the mind control ability of Yuri base, it can obtain a steady stream of funds. Cruel, but very practical. However, this kind of building itself does not have any counter-attack capabilities and can only passively recover the troops sent to the designated location. Now, all the Yuri troops around the troop recycling station have been wiped out, and even the defensive buildings have been dismantled, leaving only the spare main building, which has no defensive capabilities at all. Knowing this, Wang Ling did not rush to kill the army recycling station. Instead, he squeezed his right hand that had just released the electromagnetic force. He took a deep breath and slowly approached the army recycling station. He did not stop until he reached the group of people. Down. This group of people seemed to have been frightened before. After such a long battle, they were still a little trembling. Only some of the young and middle-aged people were more receptive. After seeing Wang Ling, they were ecstatic but also wary. "Sir, are you from the coalition forces? Are you sent by the coalition forces to rescue us?" Seeing their cautious but hopeful looks, Wang Ling suddenly felt a little distressed. However, he was not pretentious at this time. Instead, he nodded calmly and said, "That's right, folks, please forgive me for being late. From now on, with the protection of the coalition forces, not even a single Yuri soldier will enslave you." Really? He is really from the coalition. Great, saved, thank you to the coalition forces. Ha 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 ha. I don't have to die, I'm alive. Thank you, thank you, thank you coalition forces. Wang Ling's words finally broke the vigilance of the group of people, and they all cheered. Many people survived the disaster and survived. Many people looked like they were crazy and vented the emotions accumulated during this period. Many people even cried with joy. Seeing their performance, Wang Ling couldn't help but sigh. Just based on their cheers, this rescue trip was worth it. Of course, it's not over yet. While they were cheering, Wang Ling had already turned around, transformed into a king-level mobilization soldier, picked up a Babisha submachine gun, and started shooting forcefully. This army recycling depot. The mobilization unit is the most basic unit in the entire coalition army. It is also the unit that Wang Ling first came into contact with after entering the world of Red Alert. From a recruit at the beginning, he has grown into a powerful warrior at the level of the 10-star soldier king. This unit can be said to have recorded too much of Wang Ling's bitterness. However, after growing up, Wang Ling switched to other more powerful arms, such as magnetic blast infantry, and now elite combat soldiers, whose comprehensive combat capabilities far exceed those of king-level soldiers, so he has never specifically switched to other units. This type of arms. But now, when bombing the troop recycling depot, Wang Ling specially changed back to this most basic unit, just to get the most effective output and blow up this building that eats people without spitting out bones with his own hands. Of course, after all, he is a mobilization soldier at the level of a soldier, so his firepower output will not be bad. Wang Ling's current comprehensive firepower is equivalent to the firepower of 5 or 6 elite mobilization soldiers when they focus their fire. A conscript has very limited combat power, but quantitative changes lead to qualitative changes. With the superimposed firepower of 5 or 6 elite conscripts, even the ungraded Apocalypse tank dare not ignore it easily. As a result, under Wang Ling's bombardment, the health bar above the head of the troop recycling station rapidly shrunk to a degree visible to the naked eye, and finally exploded with a boom. Buildings like this have corresponding working units inside. After the army recycling bin exploded, 2 Yuri recruits also appeared in it. However, Wang Ling still did not specifically switch arms. He just used the firepower of the mobilized troops to suppress the 2 Yuri recruits and forcibly killed them. At this point, all the Yuri troops and buildings in this area were finally cleared. With the last explosion, the cheers of the people behind them suddenly increased to several heights. As a combat force, Wang Ling successfully completed his main task. Later, he would need to assist in transporting troops and safely transfer this group of people. After receiving Wang Ling's instructions, this group of people rushed back to the concentration camp and released all the other people detained in the concentration camp. There were more than 300 people, which was more than an ordinary field team. If the rescue is not timely, these people will probably be poisoned by Yuri's troops and be sent to the army recycling station one by one. Quick, don't be stunned. The wounded and sick have priority. Get in the car and get out of this damn place. After sighing, Wang Ling hurriedly directed the evacuation work, and a group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles that had been in place quickly came forward. Carrying more than 200 people, and then quickly evacuated under the escort of terrorist robots. As the escort team, Rhino tanks and Apocalypse tanks were slower and did not follow this area. Instead, they stopped halfway to respond and guard. The entire retreat was done in an orderly manner. As for the remaining people, after all, the cargo capacity was limited and there was no way to get them all on board. Fortunately, the remaining people were basically strong young people with sufficient physical strength. After the batch of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles left, they retreated on foot with Wang Ling. Before those anti-aircraft crawler vehicles rush back, we can evacuate as far as we can. During this period, Wang Ling also took the time to watch the electronic video and found that the battle had also begun in the troop recycling area where the Allied forces were responsible. Allied Prism tanks are powerful siege weapons. With the protection of Phantom tanks, an attack of this level is not a problem. 2 Prism tanks fired Prism rays from a long distance and killed several Yuri recruits in a line. Attracted the attention of Yuri's troops, and they all began to fight back. Among them, the fastest ones are naturally the Gate tank and the Tornado tank. However, as soon as these tanks approached the Prism tank, they exploded violently one after another. It was the Phantom tanks defending near the Prism tank that were firing. Swish! Swish! Without the threat of tanks, the Prism tank attacked more smoothly. Under the continuous bombardment of Prism rays, a large number of Yuri troops died tragically. Even if they forced themselves close to the Prism tank, they were beaten coldly by the Phantom tank. This continued for a period of time. After the output, all Yuri's troops were completely destroyed. Even the 4 defensive buildings and the troop recycling station were not spared. They were all blasted by the Prism tank from a distance. Subsequently, more than 10 transport helicopters arrived quickly, parked next to the concentration camp, accepted a large number of people, and the evacuation plan began. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 594. Quick, before Yuri's troops notice this place, we can evacuate as much as we can. Young and middle-aged people are given priority. Hurry. As for the Allied forces, after all the troops dispatched were armored troops. They were considered separate units in the game world and could not speak. These retreat orders came from the voice of General Reagan coming from the long-range wireless intercom of the Prism tank. Different from the Allied forces, although it is also a rescue, the Allied forces have some purpose. The main purpose is to want these people to join the Allied forces, so naturally they have to give priority to rescuing young adults. As for the remaining old, young, women and children, they were discovered by Yuri's troops and could even be abandoned when necessary. This cannot be blamed on the Allies being cruel. After all, the attitudes of the two armies are different. Even though they are fighting jointly, the area of the Holy City is within the sphere of influence of the Allied forces. Naturally, these people are also the people of the Allied forces. The Allied forces don't have much need to spend a lot of money to rescue a group of people who have nothing to do with them. In this regard, General Reagan still had a lot of thoughts. Observing the scene from the electronic map, both Wang Ling and General Li Weiki were a little angry, but there was nothing they could do to the Allies. After all, they were indeed rescuing these people. Allied transport helicopters are difficult to use in frontal combat. Although they are equipped with machine guns, their power is really limited. They can only bully ordinary infantry on the ground who have no air defense capabilities. If it were a tank, just wait and let it attack. It's also hard to blow up. Therefore, the number of transport helicopters within the Allied forces is simply not comparable to the coalition's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles. Even if a batch is temporarily produced, there are only more than 10 at best, and they can only carry 70 or 80 people at full load. A group of young adults were selected and all entered the plane and returned directly. Others could only follow the Prism tank and Phantom tank and return on foot. Before these transport helicopters returned, they could retreat as far as they could. Fortunately, the Allies did not completely abandon this group of people. Along the road, there were some rocket pilots, multi-purpose infantry vehicles, Grizzly tanks, and even a few terrorist robots for defense. After seeing what happened, Wang Ling gradually regained his composure and led the remaining people to evacuate one after another on the winding mountain road on the edge of the hill, while still observing the movements of Yuri's troops. According to what he thought, it would be perfect if Yuri's troops reacted slowly, or simply didn't care about the actions of the coalition and Allied forces, allowing them to return safely. However, the ideal is full of ambitions, but the reality is dull. The two army recycling depots and this group of people, which are one of the sources of funds for these Yuri bases, have been taken away in one pot, and they are still being transferred on a large scale. How could Yuri base not care? How could it not respond? Just after the coalition's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles bypassed the mountain roads and left the hilly area, the two Yuri bases on the mountainside and on the top of the mountain had already taken corresponding actions. The Yuri base on the mountainside directly dispatched more than 10 laser UFOs, divided into two teams, to intercept the coalition forces and the Allied troops evacuating on foot. The mountaintop base dispatched more than a dozen Get tanks, more than 20 Yuri recruits, and 2 virus snipers to evacuate the troops on both sides. These Yuri troops were not stupid. The vehicles used by the first batch of people to evacuate were too fast for them to catch up, so they simply intercepted the following troops and people. Hurry up, those bastards have sent troops to intercept them. Seeing this, Wang Ling couldn't help but feel anxious, and urged the people to evacuate quickly. And after this group of people had been enslaved before, they also knew the ruthlessness and cruelty of Yuri's troops. How could they dare to be so slow anymore? They all sped up and moved forward. Fortunately, the remaining personnel were all young adults, and no one was holding back along the way. Of course, given the speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, it would take about 20 minutes to get around this mountain road, let alone a group of people evacuating on foot. Even though the speed has been accelerated, it will still take a long time to get around this mountain road. During this period of time, Yuri's troops were not idle. The mountain roads were restricted and ground troops had to make repeated detours, making their march difficult. However, the air troops were very convenient. After Wang Ling led a group of people and marched for several minutes, Yuri arrived on the mountainside. The base's 7 laser UFOs had already hit them head-on. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. As a result, these laser UFOs did not make too many preparations at all, and directly started a brutal attack, firing laser beams one after another into the crowd of people. On average, every 2 shots could completely kill an ordinary person. After just a few seconds of shooting, 5 or 6 people died tragically. It turns out that these laser UFOs came to intercept, not to recapture the fleeing people, but to kill them directly. Yes, the prey in their eyes, the nutrition that should have been sent to the army recycling station, was suddenly rescued. The Yuri base was so angry that they didn't expect to capture it anymore. What I can't get, you guys don't even think about it. You're looking for death. But these laser UFO methods happened to hit Wang Ling's bottom line. With an almost hysterical shout, he instantly transformed into a king-level anti-aircraft infantry. With the only remaining anti-aircraft tracked vehicle beside him, he started a rapid attack. Counterattack. Dong 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 dong. Dong 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 dong. The other anti-aircraft crawlers were all used as transportation tools, but Wang Ling's vehicle, the elite anti-aircraft crawler of the Wolf Group, remained. Coupled with Wang Ling's firepower, it seemed that there were 5 or 6 at this moment. An elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicle was like a concentrated fire. Under the counterattack of the powerful anti-aircraft force, a laser UFO was knocked out in a matter of moments. However, the targets of these laser UFOs seemed to be only the current group of people. They paid no attention to the counterattacks of Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, and forced their shelling to kill these people. As a result, after a period of continuous shelling, all the laser UFOs were shot down, but nearly 20 people were also forcibly killed during this period. With this number of casualties before his eyes, Wang Ling almost turned red. He clenched his fists tightly and his joints made a crunching sound. However, after being annoyed for a moment, Wang Ling forced himself to loosen his fists and exhaled a breath. Go on, speed up, hurry up if you don't want to die. He is angry, but what can he do if he is angry? I can only bite the bullet and move on. Not long after the coalition forces were blocked, 7 laser UFOs also approached from the coalition forces, and they opened fire on the civilians below. In the direction of the Allied forces, the people on foot were mainly old, young, women and children. They had no resistance at all under the laser light. Almost one laser beam could kill one person. The killing speed was ridiculously fast. Of course, the Allies would not just watch this group of people die. The dozen rocket pilots in the air protection immediately opened fire to counterattack. 3 multi-purpose infantry vehicles from the distance also arrived temporarily and opened fire together with this group of lasers. UFO started fighting. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 595. Swish swish swish. Swish swish swish. Choo choo choo. The laser UFO, multifunctional infantry vehicle and rocket pilot each opened fire, and the scene was filled with the sounds of various artillery fires. However, the troops of the two sides are not attacking each other. Just like what happened to the coalition forces, the main targets of these 7 laser UFOs are still the group of ordinary people. They are also forcibly killing them despite the bombardment of the Allied air defense forces. The Allies were actually counter-attacking these laser UFOs, but with more than a dozen rocket pilots and 3 multi-purpose infantry vehicles, the air defense power was not even as good as Wang Ling's alone. As a result, they fired continuously for a long time. Only 7 laser UFOs were destroyed. During this period, nearly 40 of the remaining people had been shot and killed. Facing this ferocious attack by Yuri's troops and watching their relatives and friends die tragically, the rest of the people seemed to be frightened and trembling. However, the Allied forces did not panic at all and continued to forcefully retreat with the remaining personnel. The first round of blocking was broken at a heavy cost, but the ground troops of Yuri's second round of blocking were still teetering on the mountain road. Wang Ling was not familiar with the terrain and could not tell when these troops would catch up with them. He could only keep urging the people he was responsible for to speed up the evacuation. The group of people was advancing almost at a trot. This speed is still too slow for Wang Ling, and with his physical strength, he can simply ignore this consumption. But where have other people experienced this kind of trek training? Even though they were all young adults, they were all out of breath after continuing for a while, and their speed dropped again and again. Seeing how tired they were, Wang Ling was indeed anxious, but he couldn't continue to push them. But chirp! Oh ho! He didn't want to press any more, but someone took his place. He was just about to let the group of people rest, but suddenly there was a faint sound of gunshots. A young man was shot to death in an instant, and a ball of virus burst out of his body. Smoke! Virus sniper! This sudden change shocked everyone. Wang Ling was also shocked, but when he recovered, he immediately realized the attacking troops. Sure enough, after searching the electronic map, I found that on the mountain road in the distance, a virus sniper from the Yuri force was holding a sniper rifle and aiming here. Damn it! Everyone, be careful, don't come into contact with the smoke, and retreat quickly. As soon as he gritted his teeth, Wang Ling hurriedly issued the order and led a group of people to retreat a certain distance. He had ignored units such as virus snipers. Although the range of this type of unit was not as good as the genuine allied snipers, it could still hit farther than Wang Ling. Moreover, the setting in the game means that when troops standing on high ground block the enemy below, the range will be much further than usual. With the help of this rule, the virus sniper actually found a loophole and bypassed Shang. He had to take a long detour on the mountain road and forcibly killed a person. Of course, this distance is already the limit shooting distance of the virus sniper. After Wang Ling ordered to retreat, the virus sniper was unable to fire a second shot. He had no choice but to give up temporarily and continue to follow the troops and walk on the mountain road. But her shot also made Wang Ling alert. The enemy troops were mixed with such troops, and Wang Ling did not dare to let this group of people continue to advance. Just when he was feeling worried, he suddenly saw on the electronic map that 3 Rhino tanks were approaching not far from those Yuri troops. It came just in time. Seeing this, Wang Ling was delighted and quickly issued an attack order to the 3 Rhino tanks through the radio. To be honest, Wang Ling did not pay attention to the Yuri troops and other types of troops that were attacking. They could easily be dealt with by one person. However, Wang Ling was very afraid of the virus snipers. As the saying goes, an inch is longer than an inch is strong. Wang Ling's current shooting range cannot reach the virus sniper at all. This virus sniper can hide outside its range and kill Wang Ling, so he has to guard against it. Those 3 Rhino tanks don't have to go head-to-head with other Yuri troops. They only need to forcefully deal with the virus sniper and leave the rest to Wang Ling. After receiving the order, the 3 Rhino tanks immediately changed their target, chose another mountain road, and ran into the Yuri troops. The mountain road was rugged, and it was very time-consuming to go around it. However, heading in the opposite direction, the time was shortened by more than half, and as a result, they bumped into the Yuri troop halfway. Although the main task of these Yuri troops was to kill ordinary people, they could not ignore the 3 Rhino tanks coming with great momentum. 5 or 6 Get tanks and more than a dozen Yuri recruits immediately focused their fire to temporarily block the attack. But these Rhino tanks didn't care at all. They braved the firepower and forced their way through the blockade, focusing their fire on the virus snipers hiding at the rear. Although the unleveled Rhino tanks had limited damage to infantry, when the 3 tanks opened fire at once, the virus snipers could not hold on and were quickly eliminated. During this process, Get tank and Yuri's new recruits were not idle either. With concentrated fire, they successfully destroyed a Rhino tank. However, the remaining 2 Rhino tanks still refused to exchange fire with him. Under Wang Ling's order, they broke through the blockade again and seemed to have to leave here to join Wang Ling, even running over 3 people to death in the process. Yuri recruits. After suffering this big loss, this group of Yuri troops also resented the 2 Rhino tanks and disrupted the rhythm. The 5 or 6 Get tanks no longer waited for Yuri's new recruits and followed the Rhino tanks from behind in advance. Go up. Without the burden of infantry, the Getter tank is much faster. From time to time, it can catch up with the Rhino tank and focus its fire. However, the first level of firepower, and the intermittent shooting, was not enough to kill the Rhino tank. As a result, after a chase, it didn't take long to reach the area where Wang Ling and the group of people were. After arriving at their destination, the 2 Rhino tanks finally couldn't bear it anymore. At Wang Ling's signal, they turned around and started to fight head-on with the Getter tanks. And Wang Ling did not miss this opportunity. He raised his rifle from behind the tank and started shooting. Under the powerful firepower, these Get tanks were like big crispy skins, exploding one after another. On the other hand, the 2 Rhino tanks, but only one car was knocked out with half of its health. The remaining Yuri recruits were still on their way, but Wang Ling didn't care about these people. He called 2 Rhino tanks and continued on his way with a group of people. After a period of time, the Yuri recruits finally ran into Wang Ling head-on, but before they could react, Wang Ling fired a few shots at them and was already dead, unable to stop Wang Ling even half a step. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 596. At this point, all Yuri's encirclement and suppression troops from the coalition forces were finally wiped out. Wang Ling breathed a sigh of relief, and then continued to escort the group of people to move, occasionally observing the dynamics of Yuri's troops and the situation on the Allied side. As for the coalition forces, due to Wang Ling's arrangements and personal escort, although there were casualties, they were all under control after all. However, as far as the Allies are concerned, the situation is not very optimistic. After Wang Ling eliminated all Yuri's interception troops, the Allied forces were also attacked by Yuri's troops. The lineup also consisted of 6 or 7 Get tanks, more than a dozen Yuri recruits, and a deadly virus sniper. After this group of troops approached, the Allied forces first used rocket pilots to fight. However, the Getter tanks were very restrained by the rocket pilots. Under strafing, they shot down all the rocket pilots at the cost of only one being blown up. The soldiers then rushed forward regardless of the shelling of Grizzly tanks and multifunctional infantry vehicles. After crossing the line of fire, they directly attacked the group of people. A large number of people were killed one after another. Among them, the virus snipers hiding at the back are the most vicious. Each shot can kill one person. The bursting virus smoke spreads into the crowd at will, causing continuous poisoning and killing a large number of people. Seedling. This is a completely lifeless strategy. I would rather be killed myself than kill as many ordinary people as possible. The sinister intentions are evident. In the end, all the Allied guards worked together to destroy all the Yuri troops, but the number of civilian casualties exceeded 30, and because of the raging virus smoke, this number is still increasing. Seeing this scene on the electronic map, Wang Ling gritted his teeth in anxiety, but obviously the Allies didn't care too much. They led a group of people and forcibly crossed the area of the virus smoke at the cost of 3 lives and continued to evacuate. Up to now, the troops dispatched by Yuri's troops at the first moment have been successfully annihilated. They failed to completely block the progress of the 2 armies, but they also succeeded in wiping out a group of ordinary people. However, Yuri's troops did not give up yet. Afterwards, they sent a group of troops to block and intercept. If they did not leave this hilly area completely, similar blockades would continue. Who made this place Yuri's? The territory of the army. Fortunately, After Wang Ling suffered 2 heavy losses, he learned wisely and made preparations in advance. After 2 consecutive waves of attacks, he counterattacked and killed Yuri's troops at a very small cost. However, the Allied forces did not care at all. Although they successfully eliminated the enemy troops, a group of people who followed them were killed again. There were more than 200 people when they set out, but now there are less than 100 people. Everyone died on the way. Damn it, you bastards. These Allied troops don't care about those human lives at all. Wang Ling witnessed what happened and wanted to find them directly and give them a beating. But he really couldn't spare any time now, so he could only curse and protect the people around him. Finally, after a period of evacuation, the group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles responsible for the main transfer task of the coalition successfully completed their mission and returned one after another, meeting up with Wang Ling halfway. Seeing this group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, Wang Ling seemed to have seen a savior and quickly put all the remaining people into the vehicles. However, when he turned to look at the situation of the Allied forces, Wang Ling couldn't help but curse. Because the Allied transport helicopters completely disappeared after leaving, and the Allied air defense crawlers had returned to pick up all the cargo. People, but those Allied helicopters seemed to have disappeared, as if they had no plans to make a second trip. Without the assistance of these helicopters, it can be said that the remaining people would have no way to survive under the encirclement and suppression of Yuri troops. Although there are still some Yuri troops assisting in the evacuation, these Allied troops will not be able to survive when they encounter trouble. But it is possible to abandon these people at any time and run away on your own. A group of young adults were selected and taken away. It seemed that the Allied forces had no intention of successfully evacuating the remaining people. Damn it! Boom! In anger, Wang Ling directly punched the rock on the side, blasting the entire rock into pieces. After a brief consideration, he simply ordered all the anti-aircraft crawlers that had already carried the people to return to the base. The remaining batch of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles followed him towards the Allied forces. Although he was not a saint, Wang Ling was not a cold-blooded animal. He could not remain indifferent while watching a group of people die. As the second in command of the coalition base, Wang Ling is now fully qualified to change orders. Under his order, the originally mighty army of anti-aircraft tracked vehicles was directly divided into 2 waves. One wave quickly returned to the coalition base and evacuated the people. After the other wave left the hilly area, it made a half-circle and headed towards the area the Allies were responsible for. It quickly entered on the other side. The entire convoy was connected together and ran on the slightly narrow mountain road, just like a python, flexible and fast. Facts have proved that Wang Ling's decision was completely correct. Due to the speed of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, the entire convoy successfully merged with the Allied troops and the people in just over 10 minutes. At this time, the Yuri force had 6 laser UFOs forcibly killing the remaining people. Although there were several multifunctional infantry vehicles were blocking the attack, but it was of no use at all. They could not defeat those laser UFOs in a short time, and over time, the number of people dying could be imagined. Damn it, all the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, fire them all, not a single one is left, shoot them all down for me. At this time, the coalition air defense tracked vehicles were in position. Under Wang Ling's order, they suddenly opened fire fiercely. Even Wang Ling transformed into a king-level air defense infantry. Under the superposition of firepower, the 6 laser UFOs were almost instantly they were all shot down. After dealing with these laser UFOs, Wang Ling swept towards the remaining people. Only about 80 people were left in the originally mighty team, and nearly half of them died. This comparison made Wang Ling furious. He didn't bother to talk nonsense to the Allied troops and shouted directly, "Everyone who is left, get in the car and evacuate quickly." As for this group of people, after repeated rounds of death screening, many people have gradually turned from hope to disappointment and even despair. However, Wang Ling's cry was like a ray of light in the darkness. Brought hope again, and everyone's spirits were lifted, so they rushed forward and entered the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. Wang Ling, you stretched your hand too far. These people are in charge of our allies. What do you mean by suddenly coming here to snatch people? Do you look down on our allies? But at this moment, there was a sudden call from the scene. A majestic shout was made, and everyone followed the sound and saw that it was the long-range radio on the light tank that was making the sound. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 598. Wang Ling was quite familiar with this voice. Wasn't it the Allied commander of the Holy City Theater, General Reagan? It seems that General Reagan also had objections to rashly intervening in the Allied evacuation mission. However, he had opinions, didn't Wang Ling? Are you the Allied forces responsible? What are you responsible for, sending these unarmed civilians to die? In response to General Reagan's question, Wang Ling was not polite and directly questioned and ridiculed. You are presumptuous. As expected, General Reagan immediately became angry and reprimanded using the radio remotely. No matter how outstanding your military exploits are, Wang Ling, you are still not an officer, let alone a commander. This is the attitude you have when facing your superiors. Talking. And Wang Ling has been holding it in for a long time. He refused to give in and responded tit for tat, Sir? Where did I get a commander like you? You said that your allies were responsible for evacuating this group of people, but open your eyes and see how many people there were when they first evacuated, and how many are left now. General Reagan also tried to reprimand, but Wang Ling preempted him and reprimanded him instead. Are your Allied helicopters slower than our anti-aircraft crawlers? The second batch of our anti-aircraft crawlers have already returned quickly. We're at the base, where's your helicopter? Huh. In front of that group of people, when Wang Ling asked this question, General Reagan inevitably felt guilty, but as if to cover up this guilty conscience, he reprimanded him even more angrily. The affairs of our allies are none of your business. Wang Ling, what's the matter? Stop pretending to be a big-tailed wolf with me here. Can't our Allied helicopters move those people to a safe place? I have to report everything to you. Snort. Wang Ling was happy and scolded without concealment. Stop talking nonsense to me. Don't treat everyone as fools. Send them to a safe place. When your precious helicopters come back, all of these people will be dead right now, damn it. The people in our coalition's sphere of influence are no longer human beings. We only select a group of young and middle-aged men and leave a group of old, young, women and children to fend for themselves. How did you become a general with your style? You have no authority and are talking nonsense. If I don't teach you a lesson, I think you don't even know your last name. Do you really think I don't dare to touch you? Buzz buzz. When Wang Ling discovered this little trick, General Reagan was annoyed, as if he had been slapped on the monkey's butt. During the threat, he had a posture of wanting to tear his face apart. At his signal, the surrounding light tanks, phantom tanks, multifunctional infantry vehicles, and grizzly tanks all gathered together and pointed their guns at Wang Ling, as if they might open fire at any time. With this kind of lineup, even if Wang Ling has experienced intermediate strengthening, even if he has become an elite combat soldier, once the opponent really opens fire, he will only die and there is no way to escape. This is simply a naked threat of force. Seeing this posture, the group of people were also frightened, and the coalition's anti-aircraft tracked vehicles directly surrounded the group of Allied tanks from the outside. It is true that anti-aircraft tracked vehicles have limited damage to tanks, but at this moment, they cannot lose their momentum. This is the first time since the two sides united that the two sides are facing each other in a tense confrontation. The slightest spark may completely ignite the war. However, Wang Ling glanced around at these tanks, and instead of showing any sign of fear, he smiled frivolously, shook his head and said, General Reagan, You are really stupid. Although I, Wang Ling, am not an officer, I am also a hero of the coalition forces. Level unit, I am one step away from being a general, and my status is not even inferior to that of ordinary generals. PoortoRich looks at me differently. I dare not say how amazing I am with these achievements, but at least I can guarantee that if you dare to touch me, even if you dare to touch me in a moment, the rare joint agreement between your and our armies will officially break down, and you will become the sinner of the Allies. How could General Reagan not know about this outcome? If they were to be killed by other members of the coalition, although the impact would be bad, they could still be falsely claimed as manslaughter and downplayed. But Wang Ling can't do it here. After all, this guy's status in the coalition is too high. If he really takes action, the two sides will break up immediately, and the consequences will be disastrous. Therefore, these tanks only surrounded but did not attack. In the final analysis, General Reagan also had some scruples. Of course, in terms of momentum, General Reagan was no longer weak. After a few seconds of silence, he sneered and asked, "Do you think I will be afraid of this? I have already seen that your coalition forces are not pleasing to the eye, and the agreement breaks down. At worst, it will go back to the previous situation state, everyone is doing their own thing." "What kind of nonsense are you talking about?" Wang Ling sneered, with a sharp look. "Do you think that the coalition and allied forces can really fight against the empire of the mind just by relying on their respective technology and combat effectiveness? Haha, if that's really the case, do we deserve to join forces?" At this point, Wang Ling paused and brought the topic back up. "General Reagan, I don't want to say any more gossip. I just want to remind you that you don't take human life seriously. What's the difference between this and Yuri? Having said that, think about it slowly. I took him away in advance, so you don't have to worry about accompanying a group of troops." These words actually frightened General Reagan, and he was unable to refute him for a while. Wang Ling took this opportunity to turn around and yelled, "Get out of my way." The multifunctional infantry vehicle and the grizzly tank that were blocking the road actually got out of the way in dejection. Wang Ling was not polite and strode out of the encirclement, then waved his arms at the group of people. "If you don't want to die, get in the car and I'll take you home. Go home. Yes, go home. Hurry up and get in the car. This officer is quarreling with other troops because of us. Let's not hold him back. Let's go home." "But wasn't our home destroyed by those barbarians?" "Silly boy, our family is gone, but our people are still there." The two words "go home" are simple to say, but for this group of people who were originally treated like animals, they are extremely precious. For these two words, a group of people put down all their vigilance and quickly got into the house. Entered the batch of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles. Wang Ling also came to the Wolf Group's anti-aircraft tracked vehicle, took one last look at the Allied tank troops, and without saying anything else, got directly in. After the entire anti-aircraft tracked vehicle unit assembled, they quickly began to retreat. Boom. Damn it. A senior colonel dares to talk to me like this. Alliance Army, you have the guts? In the Holy City area, the Eastern Castle, and inside the Allied command post, General Reagan finally made a move after Wang Ling left. He punched the control panel hard. Recalling Wang Ling's attitude towards him, he was so angry that he refused to fight. "Come to one place." Beside him, an adjutant added more jealously, "General, can't we just let this matter go? Why does Wang Ling interfere in our affairs and speak so rudely? It's really unjustifiable if we don't teach him a lesson." On this day, moments and vlogs were filled with condolences and wishes, which made my nose feel a little sore. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 599. As the adjutant of the Allied base, this person had heard the entire conversation between Wang Ling and General Reagan. As Wang Ling, he dared to speak like this to his commander, which made him feel angry. Now, seizing the opportunity, he started to take advantage of it. However, instead of achieving the results he wanted, General Reagan seemed to be extinguished. After hearing this, General Reagan took a few deep breaths, and then snorted coldly and said, "Lesson? He, Wang Ling, is now the darling of the coalition forces, just like Agent Tanya of our allies, and his status is even higher than that of Agent Tanya. We want to teach him a lesson. Will the coalition forces agree?" The adjutant seemed to be still unconvinced, "But General, let's deal with this matter, shall we? Wang Ling talks to you like this and contradicts the commander. This is enough for us to teach him a lesson. And he also interferes in our affairs, so we will, if we use this as a reason to ask the coalition forces to ask for someone, can they still refuse to hand it over? Are we justified?" General Reagan didn't seem to think so. He looked at the rapidly retreating army of coalition anti-aircraft tracked vehicles on the electronic map. After pondering for a while, he sighed, "What he said is actually right. We are indeed, it's just a symbolic transfer of those people, and we don't even care about life or death. This approach itself has made us unreasonable, and I don't want to end up with the same reputation as Yuri. But is that all? Otherwise, just for this symbolic transfer, we have sacrificed more than 10 rocket pilots. Now that the civilians have been taken away, it saves us trouble. However, I still have to pay for this. I wrote it down, and if there is a chance in the future, I must let him return it." Of course, Wang Ling didn't know about the conversation between General Reagan and his deputy. Even if he knew, he probably wouldn't take it too seriously. Now he is sitting in an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, escorting the group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles and relocating people. It has to be said that the mobility of the anti-aircraft crawler vehicles is indeed too strong. If we walk back to the base from that side of the mountain road, at the speed of this group of people, it may take most of a day or even a whole day, but in under the rapidity of the army of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles, it only took less than half an hour to break into the Holy City area, and they would reach the coalition base in a short time. With this group of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles traveling, the transfer efficiency has indeed been greatly improved. Now entering the Holy City, safety issues are almost guaranteed. Of course, it's just about the same, nothing is absolute. Previously, the Yuri base on the top of the mountain had sent a team of soldiers to attack the Holy City's defense line. The total number of soldiers exceeded 100, and all types of troops were very complete. This group of infantrymen did not have any means of transportation and only relied on their legs to travel long distances. Naturally, they could not match the speed of motorcycles. But no matter how slow they were still advancing, and now they happened to be charging inside the Holy City. With the route of Wang Ling's anti-aircraft crawlers, they might hit them halfway. Observing this point from the electronic map, Wang Ling rolled his eyes and curled his lips. A bad idea came to his mind. He immediately ordered the group of anti-aircraft crawlers to change their route, bypassing this group of Yuri infantry and continue to the base. Wang Ling and the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle he was riding in followed the infantry group and rushed forward, hoping to sap them halfway. Due to the difference in speed, there is a routine stratification between the different arms of this Yuri infantry team. Among them, the two most insidious virus snipers are still at the back of the team. In this position, if there was a head-on conflict, there would be a group of soldiers in front to attract firepower, which would make it easier for them to make cold shots. However, if the conflict comes from the rear and it is an armored unit, the virus sniper will suffer. For example, the elite anti-aircraft tracked vehicle of the Wolf Group, at Wang Ling's signal, bit the tail of these two vehicles, rushed forward and killed them with a few shots, cleanly and neatly. When the virus sniper was attacked, the few psychic troops in front immediately noticed it. Even more than a dozen Yuri recruits stopped and turned around together with the psychic troops, wanting to be the first to deal with the anti-aircraft tracked vehicle. But before they could get close, Wang Ling suddenly got out of the car, smiled sinisterly, and fired directly with his rifle. No infantryman could resist the muzzle of the gun, and he was shot dead in an instant. More than a dozen Yuri recruits and the psychic troops only lasted for a few seconds before they were all killed. Before they could reach the enemy's position, a fire broke out in the backyard. After the group of Yuri recruits and wild orcs who were on their way ahead learned the news, they couldn't care less about charging. They all turned around and charged towards Wang Ling instead. Well done. But Wang Ling did not panic. Instead, he showed his silver teeth, picked up his rifle, waited for the enemy, and opened fire directly after the group of infantry approached. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Oh. Oh ho. This is not the same level of combat effectiveness at all. The elite combat soldiers can be said to have completely defeated this group of infantry. Relying on their powerful firepower and ultra-long range, the hundreds of infantrymen in Yuri's army will be able to defeat them whenever they enter his fire range. They were shot immediately, without exception. However, this group of stubborn infantrymen had no fear at all. They flew into the flames and continued to rush forward. As a result, the team of hundreds of people was wiped out by Wang Ling. Call it done. Do you still want to attack the city with this small force? After the battle, Wang Ling only left a funny comment, then turned around and got into the anti-aircraft crawler vehicle, and returned to the base unimpeded. Before him, the batch of anti-aircraft crawler vehicles had also returned to the base, settled a group of people and handed them over to the special person in charge of the coalition forces. Wang Ling did not worry about this matter anymore and successfully rescued and transferred the people. By criticizing the people, he has accomplished his mission. After returning to the base, Wang Ling had just gotten out of the car, and before he had time to move his body, General Li Weiqi's voice came over the radio, asking him to go to the command post. Wang Ling didn't think much, and entered the command post with ease, and went to the command hall to report. General Li Weiqi nodded slightly and said doubtfully, "It was a good job to temporarily change the route to help the Allied forces transfer the masses. But why did the Allied tanks surround you and make you so tense?" It turned out that General Li Weiqi had observed all the previous events through the electronic map, but the conversation with General Reagan could not be heard in the electronic video. When asked about this issue, Wang Ling couldn't help but sneered, "General, I only want to evacuate the people safely and help the Allied forces, but the commander of the Allied forces, that old bastard General Reagan, doesn't appreciate it at all. This is no secret." Wang Ling had a clear conscience for what he did, and he immediately told all the contents of the conversation, as well as the causes and consequences. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 600. Humph, what an Allied commander, how shameless. After hearing what Wang Ling said, General Li Weiqi was furious. King Xiaoming also looked unhappy after listening. "I just said that the old guy here didn't have any good intentions. He picked up a group of young adults in advance, but they didn't return home for a long time. This old guy really didn't take that people, please rest assured, you bastard. No, just select a group of people who can be forced to join the Allied forces, and the others are dispensable. This is simply not taking human lives seriously." What Wang Ling said is true. This kind of behavior is comparable to that of Yuri. Damn it, we actually want to unite with this kind of people, it's disgusting to think about it. Rovik also became irritable. Wang Ling nodded and said, "Yes, our anti-aircraft crawler vehicles need to go around mountain roads, and the transportation efficiency should not be as good as that of the Allied helicopters. However, our transport team has returned from the second trip, but the Allied helicopters seemed to be missing, and the intention was already obvious. We happened to be half rich in anti-aircraft tracked vehicles, so we took them to the Allied forces to forcefully seize people. You are right about this. From this aspect, you are fully qualified as a commander. General Li Wiki was very pleased and praised Wang Ling highly. But then, he changed the topic and said, as for the Allies, I didn't expect them to be very powerful from the beginning, but I didn't expect them to have so many tricks. They could save the remaining 80 people. We have tried our best. But Wang Ling, you have to pay attention to this old guy Reagan in the future. Oh, Wang Ling seemed to understand. General, what do you mean? Are you afraid of the revenge of that old bastard? General Li Wiki nodded and said seriously, for the sake of the people, you forced him to ask for someone, and the words were very fierce. This is certainly a relief, but it is also too offending. With the mentality of that old guy Reagan, he will probably hate you. I will inevitably wear small shoes for you in the future. Wang Ling smiled disdainfully. He gave me small shoes. Can he wear them? He is the commander of the Allied forces, and I am not from the Allied forces. That's right, can he still stretch his hands so far and ask us for someone? Ah, you have done something unconscionable, and you still ask us for help. Isn't this humiliating yourself? Zhao Pingwang and Rovsky were also a little unimpressed. But General Li Wiki said, under normal circumstances, of course he can't do anything to Wang Ling, but don't forget that now our two armies have been officially united and have some intersection with each other. He is in the same theater as us and is a commander. If he wants to embarrass Wang Ling, there are many ways and means. Are you afraid of him when the soldiers come to cover up the water and the earth? Rovsky still maintained his previous mentality, but King Xiaoping fell silent and seemed to have concerns. Wang Ling crossed his arms and smiled. It's not like that old bastard doesn't feel sorry for himself. If he sends people here again, he will really have his mouth broken and his legs crooked. This meme was used again, which happened to correspond to the last time Sun Yinglong came to cause trouble. However, General Li Wiki thought very long-term. He shook his head and looked a little serious. This kind of obvious revenge or sneaking is just the lowest method. Of course it is easy to deal with. If it is just like this, I won't use it at all. What are you worried about? In my opinion, old guy Reagan should have 3 attitudes, and come directly to find trouble. This is one. It is easier to deal with, just fight back. Second, this old guy is really turned off by what you said. You can let go of these grudges, but in my opinion, the possibility of this is very low. The last attitude has to be guarded against. On the surface, he lets go of all grudges, puts these things behind him, and treats them as if they never happened. But at the most critical moment, I will give you a hard blow. This. Originally, Wang Ling just regarded the so-called revenge as a child's play. With his strength, it was easy to deal with it. But after hearing these words from General Li Wiki, he felt a little unsure. Yes, hypocrites are often more vicious and harder to deal with than real villains. If General Reagan comes looking for trouble every now and then, that's okay, but if he hides it quietly, like a poisonous snake, then it's really hard to guard against it. Seemingly seeing Wang Ling's concerns, General Li Wiki set the pace, but suddenly smiled, ruining the atmosphere, and patted Wang Ling on the shoulder. Okay, don't think so much now. After all, we have common enemy. Even if Reagan doesn't like you anymore, you have to endure it. Even if he really wants to play some tricks, don't forget that you still have us. I won't just watch him play his tricks. Okay, thank you, General. Wang Ling let out a sigh of relief and looked away a little. It was useless to worry so much now. It was better to think about how to deal with Yuri's troops. At this point in the conversation, Wang Lingneng had finished what he had to say. He didn't stay idle in the command post for too long. He said goodbye and walked out. He got into his temporary command post and observed the situation of Yuri base through the electronic map. Take a rest for a while. Now, as the Allied spy satellite technology has completed its first innovation, the war situation has also undergone some changes. During the break, Wang Ling also specially connected the satellite signals of other war zones. After checking it, he found that this large-scale expansion of the electronic map really found a lot of Yuri troops and even some traces of Yuri bases. The corresponding theater bases are already in preparation for combat. Including the Holy City war zone, they had been defensive before, but there was no way. The electronic map was limited and they didn't know where Yuri's base was. Now that the target was there, it was naturally impossible to passively defend all the time. For this reason, in the evening, Wang Ling received another joint order from the captain and above. A group of people came to the command hall to discuss the follow-up attack plan. However, the result of the discussion is not very satisfactory. The coalition's current attack on Yuri base is very laborious and far less convenient than the Allies' Prism tank. Wang Ling specifically asked about the most suitable armed helicopter for the attack, and it has been reviewed by military industry personnel. Approval, development is accelerating, it will take some time to come out, and it is not expected for the time being. Apart from this, even Wang Ling has no good solution. A group of people discussed with each other for a while, and finally Wang Ling's proposal was approved. Wang Ling personally led some armored troops and some elite soldiers to take the lead in blocking the Yuri base at the foot of the mountain, harassing them and looking for opportunities to attack. Attacking the Yuri base is completely different from attacking the Allied base. The number of soldiers and tanks does not have any advantage at all. If a large-scale attack is carried out, not only will it be impossible to attack, but a large number of troops may be destroyed, and Yuri base will be given recoverable combat resources. Funds. For this reason, Wang Ling had to be cautious when dealing with this matter. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 601. It can be seen from the electronic map that after destroying the 2 troop recycling stations, no additional troop recycling stations have been built in the 3 Yuri bases. However, it's not because they don't have the authority and ability to build it, but because it's really not necessary. After all, Yuri's troops had been hiding in the dark before and belonged to the offensive side. All the troops controlled by the mind were used for combat on the spot. With sufficient funds, they did not need to recycle their own troops, so they did not. The base is purpose-built. But now the war situation has changed. With the successful expansion of the electronic map, the coalition and allied forces will gradually launch an attack. If they attack rashly, a group of troops will be mind-controlled by Yuri base. By then, Yuri base will be established. If you open the troop recycling bin, you can get a steady stream of income, just like in the game. Ruining his own troops and instead providing funds to the enemy is not a stupid approach, and Wang Ling must try his best to avoid it. After having this preliminary plan, that night, Wang Ling selected some armored units and several elite subordinates such as Sun Dehu to be on standby at any time. However, this battle, especially the battle with Yuri's base, must not be rushed. After the candidates were determined, they did not take action that night. Instead, they rested on the spot all night. During this period, Wang Ling was actually waiting for news from General Reagan to see if this old guy would make things difficult for him now. However, after returning to the real world to rest for a day, and then returning to the Red Alert world, where they stayed until dawn, they did not see any movement from the Allied forces. This made Wang Ling have to be vigilant. Could this dignified commander of the Allied forces really be that sinister? After hesitating for a while, Wang Ling finally chose to put these things aside for the time being. No matter how insidious General Reagan was, at least it wouldn't be bad for now. After all, there was still the threat of Yuri's troops. After looking away, Wang Ling cheered up and did some activities after breakfast. After resting for such a long time, it was finally time to set off. The Wolf Group troops selected in advance were already in place. After Wang Ling arrived, all the infantrymen got on the anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and followed the armored troops forward. Without the encumbrance of these infantry, the armored troops moved quickly. They ran all the way to the foot of the mountain and stopped outside the Yuri base, setting down Wang Ling and more than 20 elite conscripts. With their lineup, wanting to storm Yuri's base was, to put it mildly, simply wishful thinking. However, Wang Ling did not plan to attack directly, but only harassed and ambushed the area. With the destructive power of this group of people and their focus on harassment, Yuri base will suffer a lot. Coincidentally, there was a mining field nearby where they got off the bus. 2 slave mines were currently mining. There was also a psychic trooper, 2 Get tanks and 4 tornado tanks stationed around them. Seeing this, Wang Lingling was happy. Just in time, I'll give you a beating. Other personnel and tanks, pay attention to defense, these Yuri troops are left to me. Yes. Sun Dehu and others responded to the order and stayed aside to be on guard, while Wang Ling approached the mine alone, raised his gun and started shooting. His first target was the 2 Getter tanks. These things did considerable damage to infantry, and it was too dangerous to let them get close. As a result, under his rapid bursts of fire, both Get tanks exploded within a few moments. And its explosion also attracted the attention of the psychic troops and the Gale tank, who turned around and rushed towards Wang Ling. But Wang Ling was not to be outdone, and killed the member of the psychic force with a random burst of fire, and then shot at the other 4 Gustav tanks like crazy. An elite combat soldier, his firepower was so strong that he could overwhelm all enemy units within the range. Under his wildfire, 2 Gustav tanks were blown up on the way here. 1 car was knocked out of half its health. After approaching Wang Ling at such a heavy cost, the remaining 2 tornado tanks were of course not polite and fired at Wang Ling. However, due to the game settings, the damage to infantry by such ungraded shells was not considerable. In the end, Wang Ling was stunned and managed to withstand the bombardment and shot and killed the 2 guild tanks. During this period, he was also hit about 4 times and suffered some minor injuries, but this was not harmful at all. Although the current body and recovery ability cannot keep up with other elite soldiers in the game world, the recovery speed is still much faster than that of ordinary people. After killing these guards, Wang Ling further pointed his spear at one of the slave mines and started shooting. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. This slave mine is really nondescript. It can usually be moved in the form of a vehicle, but when mining, it can be deployed in a building form. Because of this particularity, it can be counted as both an armored unit and a building in the game. Therefore, elite combat soldiers do not have to follow the relevant rules and must use infrared locking devices. They can shoot forcibly with rifles. Under his crazy shooting, the health bar above the head of the slave mine was also shrinking rapidly, which was a bit more fierce than the combined firepower of 5 or 6 Rhino tanks. Although the slave mine was equipped with a machine gun, Wang Ling was outside its range, and the machine gun had nothing to do with him. He could only be beaten passively. As a result, after a period of continuous shooting, the entire slave mine was bombed. There was a direct explosion. The explosion didn't matter. The 5 mining slaves who had been enslaved earlier rebelled instantly without the constraints of the slave mine, and the original purple color in the electronic map turned directly into red. Moreover, without the task of mining, the shovels in their hands also became their weapons of attack. As if to vent their anger, they started to slap all the enemy targets around them randomly. The ones closest to them were naturally the slaves enslaved in another slave mine. Several liberated slaves worked together and a few shovels killed 1 person. Don't underestimate this slave's attack power. Although his hands are short and he can't withstand blows, if he continues to attack, no one will feel uncomfortable. Of course, these liberated slaves were not safe now. The machine gun of another slave mine opened fire directly at them, killing 2 people on the spot. "Retreat quickly, don't die here." Wang Ling was a little anxious and quickly ordered the liberated slaves to evacuate out of the shooting range of the slave mine. Then he picked up his rifle and continued to bombard the last slave mine. After shooting for a period of time, he shot them again. Explode and free 4 slaves. In fact, there are several Apocalypse tanks and many Rhino tanks among the Wolf Group troops that followed this time. As long as the psychic troop is destroyed and the armored troops are used, these Yuri troops can be killed quickly, and even slave mines. However, Wang Ling also had some careful thoughts in this. His elite combat unit has just reached the 3-star elite level and needs more combat experience to improve its level. Of course, now is not the time to be humble. Grab as much experience as you want. After all, the coalition's greatest ace weapon against Yuri's troops is his elite combat soldier. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 602. As for the remaining 7 slaves, after the slave mine was exploded, they had clearly changed their stance and wanted to be loyal to the coalition forces. Let's just call them a type of military. Although this type of military is not bad in destructive power, its hands are too short, and it has no armor, and it is too weak to withstand beatings. Unless it occupies very favorable conditions on the battlefield, it is basically useless. It is an existence that is destined to die. So overall, these liberated slaves are somewhat useless for combat at this stage. However, after all, it was 7 lives. Wang Ling did not want to see them die, so he simply sent 2 anti-aircraft crawler vehicles to take them back to the base. As for how to transform them in the future, they would directly join the army as recruits. Whether he returns to civilian status or not is none of Wang Ling's business. Hey, team leader, you're so awesome. Everyone talks about Yuri's troops being so awesome, but in front of the team leader, they don't have much power to fight back. Of course, don't look at who our team leader is, he is a hero of the coalition forces. As soon as they arrived at the base at the foot of the mountain, they took down a group of Yuri troops, blew up 2 slave mines, fired the first shot, and got off to a good start, which gave the other soldiers a lot of confidence. Of course, Wang Ling was not naive. With this record, he could forcefully attack Yuri's base. He immediately scolded them with a smile and reminded them not to be careless. The subsequent battles should still be based on obscenity and harassment. Host. Following Wang Ling on his expeditions to the north and south, this group of people had experienced a lot of wars, large and small, and of course they would not make such basic mistakes. They immediately cheered up and followed Wang Ling, blocking the way. They arrived at the outskirts of Yuri's base at the foot of the mountain, specializing in sneak attacks and ambush, and by the way besieging the base. As for this Yuri base, although it is small in scale, it also has its own productivity. When they learned that their 2 slave mines were blown up, they did not sit still and wait for death. They could not bear this tone. After Wang Ling and the others took their positions, this base actually produced more than 10 tanks one after another, most of which were Get tanks. Together with more than 10 armored units in the base, they rushed out, apparently wanting to take revenge on Wang Ling and his group. Well done, swallow as much as you come. Brothers, get ready for battle. But Wang Ling was not worried at all. He had even been prepared to deal with such counterattacks. He immediately mobilized all his subordinates and stood ready. This time, after all, Yuri base dispatched too many tanks at once. Even Wang Ling, an elite combat soldier, could not cope with the impact of so many tanks by himself, so he still followed the old routine and placed the Apocalypse tanks at the front. Slightly behind is the Rhino tank, while Wang Ling and other conscripts are hiding behind to output firepower. After the lineup was arranged, the tanks of this group of Yuri troops were already approaching. Beat. Boom boom boom. Boom boom boom. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Following Wang Ling's order, the Wolf Group troops immediately opened up their firepower. The explosive shells and dense fire snakes bombarded without restraint, destroying 5 Yuri tanks almost instantly, and blinded these Yuri tanks. Tank. However, after all, the goal was very clear, which was to attack these enemy troops. The Yuri tank's reaction was not slow. After suffering a heavy loss, it immediately began to counterattack. The two sides exchanged fire, and they were not lenient at all. This mission was not for a strong attack, but for harassment and encirclement. Therefore, most of the Wolf Group's armored units who came here were still unranked, and they were treated as just to gain battlefield experience. But there are also 3 elite-level Apocalypse tanks mixed in to protect the safety of the entire army. The incoming Yuri tanks are all pure offensive tanks. Even if Wang Ling doesn't take action, relying on the Wolf Group of tanks is enough to deal with it. What's more, Wang Ling also uses powerful firepower to carry out sneak attacks from the rear. Already. As a result, not long after the war started, the tanks in Yuri's base exploded in series. In the end, they were all eaten up by the Wolf Group, but only 1 Rhino tank and 2 others were destroyed. 1 car was half battered and 1 was seriously injured. At this price, more than 20 tanks from Yuri's troops were exchanged, and Wang Ling made a lot of money this time. However, after the war, Wang Ling became a bit stingy and transferred 5 more ungraded Rhino tanks from the base defense line, and the 3 damaged tanks on the front line were temporarily dispatched back. In short, if you can survive, you must not die. Unless you are a 3-star elite, there is no need for tanks or soldiers with half health to persist on the front line. It can be said that they are so wretched and wretched. While these tanks were alternating, Yuri base was unwilling to be left alone on the way, and once again sent 5 laser UFOs to attack. Go on, fight it down. But Wang Ling remained calm and transformed directly into a soldier-level anti-aircraft infantry. He took several anti-aircraft tracked vehicles and hid behind the Apocalypse tank. He lit up the barrel and opened fire when the laser UFO approached. Dong 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 dong. Whizzing. Under the bombardment of that powerful firepower, the blood volume of the laser UFO at the head was reduced visibly to the naked eye. When escorting people to move yesterday, Wang Ling was able to kill 7 laser UFOs by cooperating with an elite anti-aircraft crawler vehicle. What's more, the firepower he can cooperate with is even stronger now. Not only were several surrounding anti-aircraft tracked vehicles firing like crazy, but even the Apocalypse tank also fired anti-aircraft missiles. Although the speed was slow, it could hit 1 shot at a time. Under such a rapid attack, the few laser UFOs were immediately in a hurry. By the time they reacted, 2 of them had been knocked out, and 1 was still half full and 1 was still full. In this state, the remaining 3 laser UFOs forcibly aimed at an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and bombarded it. However, in the end, they only knocked out half of its health before they were all shot down. As this half-health anti-aircraft tracked vehicle was of elite level and had its own health recovery function, Wang Ling was too lazy to change troops. Buzz buzz. After all, this place was right under the nose of Yuri base, and Wang Ling led his team to resist. They were very tenacious and troublesome. Yuri base failed twice in a row, and of course they didn't want to let them go. Following the laser UFO, 2 mind control vehicles came out of Yuri's base, along with 3 magneto-electric tanks and 3 getter tanks. They squeezed together and rushed out of the base, running towards Wang Ling and the others. Come. To be honest, this combination is quite disgusting. It is simply a simplified version of the multi-arms joint attack of Yuri's army. Wang Ling would have found it difficult to do it before. But now, as an elite combat soldier, Wang Ling just smiled playfully when he saw the current lineup, and temporarily ordered the rest of the army to retreat in tanks. He walked up alone. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 603. As a special existence in the Red Alert world, although Wang Ling's mental strength cannot control others like the psychic troops, it is enough to be immune to mind control. What's more, he is now an elite combat soldier. The several types of armored units dispatched by Yuri's troops this time are very difficult for other soldiers and tanks to deal with, but in Wang Ling's eyes, they are just living targets. After all, they were very close to Yuri's base. It didn't take long for these Yuri troops to break into Wang Ling's shooting range. Wang Ling showed no mercy and picked up his rifle and started to attack. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Click. Click. Boom. Under his fire suppression, the three Getter tanks were blown up almost as soon as they regained consciousness, and the three Magneto tanks lasted even shorter time. The two mind-controlled vehicles were stronger, but under Wang Ling's bursts of fire, the health bar above their heads was rapidly shrinking. At the cost of one being blown up, another mind-controlled vehicle finally managed to get close to Wang Ling, but found that this guy was not under control at all, so it wanted to get past him and control other units. But Wang Ling disagreed and continued to fire, completely blowing up the mind-controlled vehicle before it could pass him. In the end, this small-scale multi-arms joint operation had no way to deal with Wang Ling, and it was completely destroyed without even a single bullet hitting him. This repeated siege was forcibly broken. You can imagine how annoyed the commander of Yuri base at the foot of the mountain was. After the third wave of siege failed, the fourth wave quickly organized and rushed out of the base. The number of remaining infantrymen in Yuri base at the foot of the mountain is not too many, only about 200 at best, which is equivalent to the total number of people in a field group. For this fourth wave of encirclement and suppression, Yuri base directly dispatched half of the troops in the base. Of soldiers. This time's encirclement and suppression was somewhat dangerous for Wang Ling. Because inside, there are dozens of Yuri recruits, more than a dozen orcs, 5 psychic troops, and 2 virus snipers. When it comes to other arms, it's easy to say that Wang Ling can defeat them all by himself, but those 2 virus snipers are Wang Ling's current nemesis, and they are still at the back specializing in insidious attacks, which is really annoying. If you are not careful, you may capsize in the gutter. However, nothing is absolute, and Wang Ling is not unable to crack such a lineup. On the way to the charge, the 5 psychic troops got mixed up with Yuri's new recruits and put a certain distance between themselves and the last 2 virus snipers. Wang Ling noticed this distance and had a bad idea. After all, they were too close to Yuri's base. Although this group of Yuri troops was not very fast, they were already close to Wang Ling and the others not long after they charged. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. And Wang Ling didn't even say hello, he just raised his gun and fired. After a series of shots, nearly 20 Yuri recruits and 6 wild orcs at the front were killed instantly, revealing the psychic troops mixed in the team. After the target was clear, Wang Ling directly changed the target and fired 5 times in a row. 5 psychic troops were instantly shot dead in the team. With this first layer of threat gone, Wang Ling quickly waved his hand, and the 3 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles that had been arranged in advance rushed forward, forcibly rolled over these Yuri recruits, rushed to the rear, and killed them with a few shots. The 2 virus snipers, not wanting to fight anymore, turned around and rushed back immediately. At least 10 Yuri recruits were crushed to death in one encounter. The 3 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles were dispatched too suddenly and at an absurdly fast speed. Some of the Yuri recruits tried to fight back, but they failed to hit a few shots. In the end, the 3 anti-aircraft tracked vehicles were hardly damaged, and they killed the virus sniper directly. Without this only threat, no unit among this group of infantry could contain Wang Ling. In the end, nearly 100 Yuri recruits and wild orcs were all killed by Wang Ling alone. Since being promoted to the 3-star elite level, Wang Ling has killed many Yuri troops and successfully gained a lot of experience. The amount of combat experience required for elite combat soldiers to increase their level is huge, but it is not unlimited. Yes, after this period of accumulation, Wang Ling finally made a breakthrough again and was promoted to a 5-star Special Forces soldier. Buzz. At the moment of promotion, Wang Ling's mind buzzed, and an enhancement of military experience quietly appeared on Wang Ling. At the same time, the weapon in his hand, the enhanced version of the AK rifle, has also been strengthened. It is more powerful, has a faster rate of fire, and has a slightly longer range. Elite combat soldiers at the 3-star elite level are already very powerful, let alone the 5-star Special Forces level. Call. The moment he completed the strengthening, Wang Ling felt so happy. After taking a deep breath, he picked up the rifle and stroked it. In his joy, a strong fighting spirit emerged, and he really wanted to try the enhanced power. However, these 4 consecutive defeats seemed to have hurt the Yuri base. After the 4th wave of encirclement and suppression, there was no other action in the Yuri base at the foot of the mountain, and they were reluctant to send more troops to encircle and suppress. If it were normal times, Wang Ling could take advantage of this time to rest for a while, but now he really wanted to test the new level of combat power, but the target still refused to appear, which made him feel a little unhappy. Of course, it was only those combat units that were in pain at Yuri base and stayed behind closed doors, but there was one exception that could barely be considered a unit, the slave mines. This slave mine, just like the mine carts of the coalition and allied forces, constantly wanders among the major mines, digging for minerals to obtain funds. After the minerals within the base have been excavated, it is natural to go out to find other minerals. Come dig. According to the practice of Yuri base, some troops are usually sent to guard before going out, because the slave mine is very vulnerable to attack. But who let Wang Ling and his group carry out sneak attacks and harassment here? The major military units in the base suffered serious losses. There were no extra troops for defense, so 2 slave mines were opened directly. Base and rushed to a nearby mine. Seeing these 2 slave mines, Wang Ling's eyes immediately lit up, he sneered twice, left the station alone, and used these 2 slave mines to test his guns. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. After a long distance, Wang Ling touched the slave mine. He raised his rifle and shot forcefully. The health bar of the target slave mine also decreased rapidly. In the end, both slave mines were killed by him. Life is full of blows. Through this test, Wang Ling generally tested his combat effectiveness. When shooting, the slave mine's health bar decreased by about 20 to 30% faster than before, and the frequency and rate of shooting even caught up. It has joined the Elite SEAL team, and its range is about 20% farther than before.